Hello, everyone. Oh, wait. I gotta get this on because we're going to Hawaii. So we need the. I mean, isn't that
That's awesome?
We're going to Hawaii tonight. Forget about the weather outside. Forget about the fact you wanted to paint the bottom of your boat tonight. We're going to Hawaii. So, well, welcome everyone to our final Wanderlust series. This has been such a fun journey for a lot of people I know through those long winter months, and now we're all excited to get out on the water. I think Minnetonka thawed now, right? Wasn't that last week or the week before? But there's such a cast of characters on this boat that you see all their names there. I'm going to have them introduce themselves, but you know it's a big boat when there's that many people on the crew, and they're going to share some great adventures. And so I'm so glad. I know more people will be clicking on. I think we're almost at 50 people so far. So we'll be excited to have you tell us your stories and adventures, and we'll see you on the other end in Hawaii.
Okay, great.
Right. Hold on, Joel. So just a few logistics for everybody. Heads up to everyone, we are recording the session tonight, and we'll post a link to the video on YouTube once it's uploaded, and we'll share that on Facebook and in our email channels to the club. We would just ask that everyone keep your videos and your microphones turned off during the program, and just leave them off until we get to the Q&A time at the end, unless you're specifically asked to turn them on, which would basically just be one of the presenters, perhaps. As I mentioned, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the program, just so that you know. If we still have questions going, we may run past 8 o'clock. So for those of you who need to jump off, that's fine, do what you need to do. But we will go until the questions are done. When we get to Q&A session, feel free to turn on your mics and video if you'd like to. Otherwise, you can type in questions that you have into the chat on Zoom at any time during the presentation. And a couple of us will be monitoring that, and we will read those first when we get to the Q&A session. But otherwise, again, you can feel free to ask your questions live once we get to that point. If we don't get to your question, something you typed into the chat, please feel free to type it in again or ask it live. That's not a problem. And we would just ask that you hold all of your questions until we get to the end. So with that, take it away.
All right, well, thanks a lot. This is fun to be a part of this program, and all of us have had a great time kind of reliving our experiences, going through a bunch of the anecdotes of what an exciting trip this was to be doing the 2017 Transpac. The first thing I want to do is introduce some of the folks that we have on the call with us. And we've got a really good cross-section of many of the members of this crew. So I want to start off with some of our local Wayzata boys. And we have Bob Bullock calling in from Guam right now. And Bob started at Wayzata Yacht Club, and he and I have been college friends forever. And sailed on the J-24 at the Wayzata Yacht Club, and ultimately sailed about 2/3 of the way around the world and joined a race from, I believe, Bob, wasn't it from LA to Japan?
It was from Hawaii to Japan. It was the first annual Hiroshima Cup. 37 days right on the water.
There you go. And then Bob ended up sailing down to Guam and ended up staying in Guam. And Bob has been in Guam for quite a few years and runs essentially the Guam Water Department for Culligan. So that ended up dropping you in a place where you ended up dropping anchor permanently, Bob. So your sailing adventures turned into a whole different life. And then we have Charlie Schroeder. And Charlie's competed in the Fastnet, the Caribbean 600. And Charlie, you did I think it was an Atlantic race, or was that a delivery?
It was a little bit of both. The ARC, the Atlantic Rally for Cruisers, is Canary Islands to St. Lucia.
That's an epic trip. And then Jonathan, what's that, Charlie?
That was 18 days.
Oh, okay, cool. Now, Jonathan, you've done Jonathan and McDonagh, who we all know and love, and ex-Commodore. Charlie's been our ex-Commodore as well. Jonathan, you've done, I think, 13 Mackinac races, 6 Trans-Superiors, and Cows Race Week.
That's correct, Joel. Glad to be here tonight and talking about the Transpac.
All right. We also have joining with us, we have Eric Doyle, who many of you know, and Eric now lives in Minnesota, I think out past Victoria on Highway 7. And Eric has competed in 3 America's Cup. He's won the World Championship in the Star, and he's also won the World Championship in the Maxis. And Eric, thanks for joining us. I think you're in San Diego right now, aren't you?
Yep. San Diego right now.
Excellent. You're
enjoying
in the North Loft, if I remember right.
Yeah. I had to go do some sail work today, and then we're gonna race some Metchels this weekend. So we'll be here for a week.
Okay. Excellent. Then we've also got Peter Eisler joining us. Peter has done 5 America's Cup sailing with Dennis Conner and others. Best-selling author. He's done at least 10 Transpacs. I might be exaggerating, but I don't think I am, Peter. And you, I think, broke the record on one of those Transpac. And Peter is also an Emmy Award-winning broadcaster. And Peter, what boat was it that you broke the Transpac record on?
Well, Joel, it hopefully will be, I'll get to set it again this year, but that was back in 2005 on an 86-footer named Morning Glory with a canting keel owned by Hasso Plattner, the famous 505 and maxi boat sailor, a longtime racer from Germany and the West Coast. And we had a great crew. We had Russell Coots and a bunch of the Kiwis that won the America's Cup with Team New Zealand. We had 2 navigators, and sadly it was the race, Roy Disney's last race, and we were in sister ships, and we got ahead in the first race, first day, and just stayed ahead and set the record 6 days and change, which hung in there until my college roommate and a bunch of sailors took a 100-footer into the race and broke it a few years ago.
Who was your college roommate? I think I might know the answer here.
Yeah, I had a few that you might know, but the college roommate in question that broke the record was Stan Honey.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Stan is he's a master of expedition as well, isn't he?
Stan is a master of everything he does. He invented the first down line that we enjoy when we watch any form of football. He's won the Volvo Around the World race. He's sailed around the planet nonstop, and he's won more Emmys than I have.
All right. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Patty O'Brien. And Patty, I think you've done at least 12 Transpacs and 1 Whitbread. And from my notes here, it looks like you've sailed over 250,000 miles offshore.
That's correct, Joe.
Okay, well, you're going to have to keep counting there. Keep that odometer running for us. So that's it. As Eric said, that's better than everybody on this call combined. So that's very impressive. Okay, gang. Well, here we go. I'm going to jump into.
Oh, hang on a
there's
second.
Our crew.
Hang on a second,
yes,
Joel.
Sir.
So Joel's our MC, and he put together this whole program. And Joel started. Let me give a little intro on Joel. He started sailing with his parents when he was 14. He's a J70 World Championship champion, a fellow A-Scout sailor. We took first place in the Coastal Cup with Catapult, the Santa Cruz 70. And in 2020, he started racing the MC32 catamarans. So take it away, Joel.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate that. And you can see our crew here. We've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 people. And Peter and I, and remember Doug and you and I, Peter, we got together and kind of handpicked this crew, didn't we? And when we look at the race, I started July 6, 2017, 55 boats, 8 boats in our class. And it took 8 days, 11 hours, 2,200 miles to get there. And let's take a peek at, actually, I want to step back for just a second and talk about how we selected some of the crew. But one of the things I remember talking with Peter about this, and and Eric and Patty is that we wanted people that everybody had to be able to drive, because the boat requires 7/24 attention. We're all on shifts and we all take our turns doing virtually everything. Another thing that I remember you guys talking about is how important it was to find people that can drive at night, which is quite challenging. When there's no stars out, no moon, keeping the boat on its line can be something. So we made it a point to pick out some really talented drivers. Then we looked for people who really understood how to manage the front end, the middle, and the back end of the boat. And then we made sure that everybody was a nice guy. So I have a criterion when I'm sailing, and that is that I really want to sail. There's two things that make sense to me. And one of those is I like to sail with people who are pretty good at what they do and get stuff done. And the other one is they need to be fun to sail with. Yeah, and I have to say this crew was really good and really fun. So I was really happy with the selection we made with the team. So Charlie, I'm going to pass this over to you and Patty to talk about boat preparation and what you guys do and safety and all that other stuff. So Charlie, you want to jump in here?
Yeah. Patty, I think we'll start maybe with you. You were talking the other day and you prepare so many boats out there. Maybe you could go through kind of the list that you got either from the Transpac or the checklist in your own mind. You talked about pulling the mast and the standing rigging, and maybe you could give us a little insight into that.
Did we lose Patty?
Well, while he's looking for that, he might be pulling up his notes here. Patty?
Yeah, I think we might have lost him, Charlie.
Okay. Could we go to I think, why don't we come back to him in a minute when he logs back in?
Great idea. You want to jump into crew craft and mission?
Yeah.
I think I'm back.
Patty, back.
There you go.
Yeah, sorry, I dropped it for some reason.
Oh, no worries.
Okay, no problem.
Patty, I don't know if you heard this, but you talked the other day and you prepare so many of the Santa Cruz 70s out there, including one of our arch rivals, Grand Illusion, of course. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you look at preparing these boats for a race like this, like you did the other night.
Yeah, sure. Well, for a long distance race like this, one of the first things you got to do is review all the safety requirements for the race, which you'll find in the notes of race and in the offshore sailing regulations. There's a lot goes into safety, all the preparation, servicing, as far as life rafts, life vests, medical kits. Let's see what else we got. Fire extinguishers, grab bags. So there's a lot goes into all that. Life rafts have to be serviced usually every 1 or 2 years. And you got to start doing this well before the start of the race. Make sure everything is in top shape and all up to inspection.
What do you do with what do you do with the running rigging? How often do you replace that?
Well, again, for a long race like the Transpac, you want to replace some of the running rigging just for the race, because, for instance, spinnaker sheets do most of the work going away, and you usually will wear through the cover on a set. So you want to start with brand new covers on your spinnaker sheets, if not brand new spinnaker sheets. Another problem you can have is the halyards. The halyards will chafe at the masthead, especially the spinnaker halyards. And if you don't have halyard locks, you want to make sure you've got a nice anti-chafe cover on the halyards at the top, and make sure it's new before the start of the race. And all the rigging should be checked, because you don't want to start a race like that with anything that's suspect at all. Everything wants to be top shape before the race.
And you check the standing rigging too, right? You're with a magnifying glass, you were saying?
Yeah. Some, a lot of times we'll actually take the mast out of the boat before like this, and you know, dismantle it completely, inspect everything, and really inspect the cold heads on all the rods, the rod rigging, the cold heads at the end, inspect them for any cracks. And if you find anything, you have to replace it.
And do you do a rig check daily on the race?
Yes. Usually we have, I mean, you'll probably have somebody up the mast every day. And look, on Grand Illusion, the guy we have that does the bow goes up the mast. He's a rigger as well. So, I mean, he always takes a peek around and looks at anything to see if anything's, you know, out of the ordinary. It is good. It's a good idea to do a rig check every day just to see if there's anything going on up there.
And would you be willing to tell us the story, your most recent story? There seems to be one every race of the Cabo race. And just for those of you who didn't know it, Patty was on Grand Illusion. They won the race, because I have to say that because I know he won't.
He won our class.
But why don't you tell us about
we only got second overall because Peter beat us.
Yeah, you won the But why don't you tell us about what happened out there?
Well, so what happened to us was we're running in about 25 plus knots of breeze it was actually the Monday morning of the race. At about 2 a.m., the spinnaker pole sheared off the mast. The spinnaker pole runs on a track up and down the mast. Actually, the track completely sheared off, 8 inches of it. And then the spinnaker pole went through the front window of the main salon, like landed, you know, came inside the boat. And the boat immediately rounded up because the spinnaker was turned into a big balloon. The boat rounded up and lay on its side. And we took a lot of water in through the portholes in the cockpit because we were laying on our side for quite a while. So it took a while to get on.
Patty,
go ahead.
Patty, I think you were in bed at that time. It was 2 a.m.
I was, yeah. Well, I was
that spinnaker pole coming through the front of the boat. That must have been a little alarming.
Yeah, I didn't know it at the time because I just I woke up. I heard the bang. It woke me up. I was actually out of the bunk and up through the hatch probably before the spinnaker pole came through the window.
Oh my God!
So, but that was exciting. You know, a little more than we wanted, but we had a good race after that.
Patty, how much water do you take on the drinking water? Do you take on the boat?
Before the race, I can't remember exactly. I believe there is a regulation. You have to start with so much water per person in the tanks. Generally, you have 2 water tanks on the boat. So you would normally maybe 5 gallons in one tank and maybe 10 gallons in the other, and work off the gallon tank, where you make water every day with a water maker, make approximately 10 gallons. Because usually 10 guys will drink roughly a gallon a day, maybe a little more. And then you also have to carry 1 gallon per person of emergency water. So if you have 10 guys, you got another 10 gallons of emergency water.
Okay.
Bob, I think you had some experiences with water, didn't you?
Well, you know, I'm a water treatment guy, and so when I was out there the day before the race, I disinfected the tanks. And because, you know, that's an important thing that needs to be done from time to time. And I remember being quite nervous about these big water tanks leaving port, heading across the ocean with the water tanks not full. Now, I know it was a race and that's why we had to do it, but being on Guam and being an ocean sailor out here, we mostly sail to survive, and carrying as much water as you can is what you do to survive in that respect. But we wanted to go fast, so we left port with our water tanks with the bare minimum requirement of water because we had the water maker. So that was nervous for me. I wasn't happy about it, but you can't argue with all the go fast folks.
The next slide is just a slide, obviously, of a PFD, and you know, it's important to check your own PFD. The PFDs we had on the boat had been checked, but it's a good idea to blow these things up, you know, with the inflation tube. Leave them overnight, make sure they don't leak, and then you pack your own stuff. You can see there's knives. We've all been through this, but but that's a critical piece of gear. And I remember Peter saying, this is the sort of thing you ought to do. You ought to blow it up and make sure it works. And don't be afraid of doing that and then repacking it. If you repack it, then you know what it's all about. There's a notion called crew craft mission, back to that earlier slide there, that a lot of us learned about when we did the safety at sea. And it's a pretty simple concept, but it's really powerful. And it puts in order what's most important. Clearly, the crew is the most important. The craft is the next most important, and then the mission. And what's really meant by that is it's great to have a mission, which in our case was a podium finish in the Transpac, but you can't do that unless the crew's in good shape, and obviously the craft is in good shape. And the craft was in great shape. And I got to tell you, so was the crew until 2 days before the race, when a critical guy, Patrick Wilson, in an attempt to get even more fit than he already is, a good friend of Joel's, sails with Joel on the J70, was working out in the hotel fitness facility, slipped off a device, put a 4-inch gash in his head. And he got himself to the doctor, I think ruining a couple of Ubers on the way with blood. And he consulted with the doctor, and the doctor said, "What are you going to do the next few days?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to sail to Hawaii." And the doctor said, "Well, I don't think that's a good idea. This is what I heard." And they debated what the best way was to stitch up his head, given his itinerary over the next week and a half. And they decided to use super glue instead of stitches, because super glue holds better. Now, I was the sort of nominal medical guy on this boat, which really meant I reviewed the medical kit with Patty's help and made sure the bandages weren't expired, that sort of thing. But this medical emergency, potential medical emergency when we were out there, was a little different than most. And I remember watching sort of hushed discussions in the back of the boat between Joel and Peter and Eric about, should Patrick go on this trip? And Patrick, of course, wanted to go. And guys, you probably remember, I mean, you were having these discussions. Do you really take a guy who's got a 4-inch gash in his head 2 nights before the race on a 2,200-mile trip to Hawaii? And ultimately, of course, the decision was made to take him. But weight is always a premium. We couldn't take any extra super glue because it would be too heavy. So we decided, and Patrick agreed, that if his head came open again, we'd use the half tube of 5200 we had on board to secure the wound. The Transpac has. Let's get to the food. The question is, what did you eat? And the food was just terrific. There's a couple of companies that provision Transpac boats, and this woman and her company made the following food, which was fabulous. Really good. These are fresh frozen and freeze-dried food, but mostly fresh frozen. And it's by day, so the refrigerator is packed, the last day at the bottom and on up to the first day. And it was really terrific food. We ate really well. This is all made in a pot, boiled in a pot on a 1-burner stove, fueled by just small cans of propane. Now, a couple of things about food. There's a lot of deprivation out there, right? And that is, you don't have what you normally have. And what we discovered is, as the trip went on, people tried to make mocha by combining ever more precise amounts of instant coffee and instant hot chocolate. So everybody had their own mixture that they preferred. And when you go on watch, you say, "Hey, anybody want anything?" And if somebody said, "I'll take a mocha number 2, then you knew what it was. This picture you're seeing now is the refrigerator, which was packed when we left. This is the last day's provision. And you can see what's left. We had to finish this race because there was no food left. There's three containers of mustard and 2 loaves of tapioca bread. And nobody wanted to eat the tapioca loaf. So this is what you got to on the last day. I think that's it.
Did we lose Joel? Joel, you still there?
He's there.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. So thank you, Charlie. Yeah, so here's the beginning of the race. Yeah, I remember it was a beautiful California day, you know, early part of July, super warm out, just gorgeous shirt sleeve weather, champagne sailing. We all got off and you can see it's not terribly windy. Yeah, and had a great time. I mean, you just being in here, the dolphins, it's a beautiful summertime day in California and we're all enjoying ourselves. And then we get up to Catalina Island and it just gets a little bit more, the wind comes up a touch. You can see the boat's heeling over a little bit. And I put on long sleeve shirts and whatnot. And then we got to this. Jonathan, you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Sure. So I remember talking to Peter because he said it gets cold. And I asked him, Lake Superior cold or Lake Michigan cold? And he said, it's a little colder than Lake Michigan, maybe not quite as cold as Lake Superior. But we had one small bag for all our gear on board. And at this point, we were wearing all our gear. The bag was empty. And this is how it was
Totally.
the next 2 days. Cold, windy, and the boat was heeled up the whole way. And then eventually you'll see here we get to some better sailing. But yeah, it was cold. I remember that. You had to hang on.
It was an ankle buster. Yeah, it was just, it hurt your ankles after doing that for 2 days. I mean, just, there was, and Patty calls it, what is it? Leeward leg syndrome. And here's an example of that. So when you stand on your left leg for so many hours, after a while, it starts to get numb. And I think the cold didn't help that very much. And Jonathan, here, I think we're starting to enter some warmer climates.
Oh yeah, the fall weather gear is coming off. The shorts are going on, and we're starting to get off the jib and get onto the kites and starting to turn downhill, which is the best part of the Transpac.
Absolutely. Here we go. One of the things I want to comment on is everybody drove. Everybody drove. We're 724, like I mentioned, 4 hours on, 4 hours off. But I just want to, the rest of you guys jump in here, but I just remember we all cooked, we ground. Bob, Charlie, jump in here.
That's right. And no, everybody did everything. It was a small crew. I mean, 10 people on, a 70-foot boat for 8 days. You had to do everything. There's four people on watch, really 4 or 5, and that's not a lot on a 70-foot boat. So everybody had to do everything just to spell, just to get some rest and ease up muscles that were seizing up after doing one thing for 2 or 3 hours.
Mm-hmm. And here we are. We're moving once again. We're moving into warmer climates. A little bit of life below deck here. And here's Bob. Bob is one of the strongest guys on the crew, and he did a lot of grinding. And well, Bob, I think you paid the price a little bit.
I did a lot of grinding because I kind of saw myself as the big dumb guy relative to all the other wonderful professionals and excellent. I'm a good sailor. Out here, I'm one of the better sailors on Guam, but on that crew, I was definitely keeping my mouth shut and listening and learning and never complaining and grinding. I did a lot of grinding, but I would have to say that that 8.5-day trip was probably one of the most mentally and physically exhausting things I'd done in many, many years, because you're on watch for 4 hours and 4 hours off, 4 hours on, 4 hours off. And when it comes time to do a sail change at the end of your 4-hour shift, well, it's a little disheartening, because you know that you're not going to get to go sit in the bunk for another 45 minutes or so. And maybe even you might only get 2 or 2.5 hours in the bunk after your 4-hour shift before you got to come back on. And I did pull a muscle in my back, and so I missed a couple of shifts, and I felt really bad about that, because when you're not on your 4-hour shift, that means somebody else is having to carry your weight, because we didn't have extra guys. So
yeah.
Muscle relaxers, somebody had some, and it made that one day much easier. And I think we had a Costco-sized jar of ibuprofen that everybody was dipping into every day, taking the limit.
Yeah, that we lived and died by ibuprofen. So here we go. Here's just more. You know, everybody does everything. Charlie's on the grinder. Doug's on the spinnaker. Eric is on the main, and I'm driving. But you know, Bob, you did a lot of grinding. You did. Yeah, right. That's how it looked. But Bob, you did a lot of grinding and a lot of driving as well. So I want to say one of the things that really helps out, the boat has got some pretty good electronics, and everybody in this race, you know, the guys who we were competing with against in our fleet had really good electronics. Hey, Eric, maybe you want to just walk through what some of these entrants are telling us. Just walk through some of the real quick.
Yeah, we got at the top in the red, that's the current boat speed, you know, hooked to a paddle wheel. And then just below that, that's our target boat speed. So somebody's off the pace here. Obviously wasn't
someone's dogging it.
So there, you know, we have a VPP which predicts how fast the boat should be going at any certain wind strength at any certain angle. So there, we're aiming to go, 11.4 knots, and the one below that is the true wind angle. So we're downwind. We can see we got the pole up, we got the spinnaker. So we're sailing 142 true wind angle. It's kind of what we look at when we're going downwind. Just below that's the compass heading. One below that, I'm struggling to see 13.6. That is it's blinking. What is that thing? I don't know. And the one on the bottom is the compass. So that's very important. We got to know where we're going. 13.6.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. I'm not sure what that is. But that's, we live and die on the, basically the what is it, Peter?
It's wind speed.
Wind speed. Okay.
There you go. Very cool.
True wind speed.
Okay,
So we got
excellent.
13 knots. We're cruising with the, probably the big A2 up at 142. That's a pretty nice angle to be sailing at. And we're going 10 knots, trying to go a little quicker.
There you go. Okay, Peter, we're going over to you and Jonathan. We want to talk about how these courses work out, and you have got a tremendous amount of experience in navigating the Transpacs, and maybe you give us a little color. I'm not sure. Can you see this slide, Peter?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, good deal.
So the big picture of the Transpac, it's just an amazing race, and it's cool because the weather is quite consistent. As it says there, it first was run, it's a biannual race, and it was run in 1906. So it's been run a lot of times, and there's a lot of, quote, local knowledge, probably just like on your lake, where when the wind comes from here, you got to go to this side of the course. And in Transpac, it's the same way, because in the summertime in the North Pacific, you get a high pressure system that just sits almost stationary, almost like the Bermuda High in the Atlantic, off of below Alaska, off the California coast. And you can see it depicted there, a circular rotation clockwise in the Northern Hemisphere. And that creates, along the rum line, which is the line on the top there, a close reach for the first about 1/5 of the race. And that was that nasty cold sailing that you saw. The winds out of the northwest, the water temperature is very cold in the 50s, and it's rough. And a lot of times the optimum course is not to sail the shortest distance, but to actually sag low because the wind angle is so tight. And as you can see, there's that curved route there is sort of a depiction of sort of what the local knowledge says. You go low at first. As you get around the edge of the hide, about a third of the way down the course, you cross the ridge and the wind starts coming aft. You get up a reaching spinnaker for a few hours, or you take bigger head sails, take the reef out. But for the final 2/3 of the race, you're in the trade winds and you're running in northeast winds. And this is why we sailed with freeze-dried food, why we sailed a 70-foot boat with only 10 people, why we only had one duffel bag worth of clothes and we wore everything the first night, because weight is everything in the Transpac race. And not only you're trying to sail the boat fast 24/7, if the boat is lighter, so you don't carry any extra water, and even though it made Bob nervous, that the final 2/3 of the race is what you come for, because the weather just keeps getting better and better. And if you look at the wind speeds, you get close to the islands there. Normally it accelerates as you approach the Hawaiian Islands, and the waves get bigger, the dolphins get happier, and you get some of the best sailing on the planet as you're sailing in down the Molokai Channel and into the finish line. A great race course and pretty predictable. I mean, there's nuances every race, but the typical route is something a bit like we have shown there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, Bob, I think you had an experience. You went to Hawaii many years ago, and maybe you tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, I was extremely impressed with the level of data and the analysis, that Peter was able to do with the tools that we had. It far exceeded my first trip to Hawaii from Acapulco to Hawaii, which we didn't have a GPS, we didn't have a sat nav. I had a plastic Mark 59 sextant and a HO 229 sight reduction manual. It took us 28 days to do that trip, and that was a lot slower. We spent a couple of hours reducing my sights, and it was kind of nice to be able to focus on something for a few hours a day, because it was kind of monotonous on 28-day trip. But I'd learned how to do that, how to use a sextant even before I knew how to sail, because I knew someday I was going to sail around the world. So that's why when I went to university, I was 19. I took a naval ROTC class in celestial and electronic navigation. And that was 1982. And in fact, that was the class, Joel Ronning was in that class, and that's where we became friends and eventually roommates. And I've sailed with him on J24s in Minnetonka, and also started sailing up on Lake Superior. And so my start in sailing was before I was a sailor. I met Joel in that class, and so we're both celestial navigators. And our captain from Lake Superior, George Hansen, when we did the trip across the Pacific, he gave us the spinnaker Old Blue, because we didn't have a spinnaker on our boat, so he gave us the one from Jest, which carried us all the way to Japan.
There you go, Bob. And Chief Plummer was that. Remember that fellow? God, that guy was.
Chief Plummer. He was a great instructor. Now there were just a few civilians. Joel, myself, Chris Durfee, all were in the sailing club. And was Hans in that class too?
I thought he was, yeah. But yes, you're right. It was a small group. It was mostly ROTC, and then there was a couple of outliers, me, you, and some other guys.
there were uniform guys, and then there were the long hairs. That was us.
All right. All right. Let's talk a little bit, Bob. I think we want to talk just a touch. One of the things that I have to say sadly impressed me is the fact that there's just every day I saw garbage in the water. And we had kind of a rugged experience with one day with that.
Yeah, we did notice we were going a little bit slower than we should have been, and using the,
I think a lot slower, lot slower.
So we were trying to figure out what was going on, and it turned out we had a hose of some sort wrapped around the rudder, and we couldn't get it off. I mean, it took us 45 minutes or so to get that thing off the rudder. And
yeah,
I mean, just the amount of trash out there. I remember standing at the grinders, you know, grinding on every wave, which is something that was pretty intense. Every little wave a grind, every little wave a grind. And so I look out at the water, and for just a flash of a second, nobody else saw it, but it was an old CRT computer monitor, and it went right past the hull. And you know, it's like nobody saw it but me, and it just tells you how many little bits of garbage there are out there in the ocean. That it's pretty sad, pretty sad.
We all need to do our part. Yeah, fewer water bottles and more, you know, water tanks and whatnot. But okay, well, let's jump on to that. I think we're getting. Oop, there's Bob's big smile. You kept us smiling on that boat. And this is one of the things that Patty talked about was rig inspection. And so, you know, most days we'd send someone up the mast. And one day I got the honor of going up, and that was kind of fun. And it was a little, you know, if you're afraid of heights, you might want to be thoughtful about this trip up. But that was damn exciting. And let's see. So here's an off watch example. You know, 4 hours on, 4 hours off. Sleeping in pipe bursts.
Yep.
And then trimming and breakfast. You can see me, I'm actively working on my burrito here. I think we're all working on our burritos. But this is part of the champagne sailing. Once you get the boat locked in, Peter was referring to this, it's just an epic trip. Another thing is that we spent a lot of time making sure that we had the weight out of the bow, and we are always shifting sails back and forth depending on whether we are on starboard or on port. And so we're using the sails as the countermeasure to the weight. And you can see a good example here on the left-hand side. You can see everyone sitting on one of the sails. And
Joel,
you know, go ahead.
What? Just because I know there's a lot of great sailors there up on the lake that are friends of yours, and I don't want them to think that you were cheating. The racing rules with regard to movable ballast is relaxed in Transpac race. They allow you to move your sails, only your sails, but you're allowed you to move them. And so the best place for the extra weight, even when you're going downwind, Santa Cruz 70, is to hike them out, which makes a nice little comfortable seat there. So you're allowed every jibe, the sails get shifted over.
Yeah, and it was, you know, it was a fair amount of work there, but you're right. Thanks. That's a great point, Peter. This is absolutely legal, and virtually everybody, if you're not doing this, you're not competitive. You almost certainly won't see the podium. One of the things, guys, we talked about was, I think, the level of intensity and yet professionalism, and how guys like Peter and Patty and Eric and everybody else on the boat, they really kept, you know, the expectations were high. And Jonathan, maybe you want to give us a thought on that.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was great sailing with Peter and Eric and everybody else. And I do remember at one point I may have collapsed the kite once or twice, and Eric looks over at me and he goes, "You're better than that." And,
right.
And everybody was really helpful. You know, there was some solid coaching on how to drive down the waves, and I learned a lot about sailing from everybody that was on board, and to get finished, the ability to be able to finish where we did everybody really had to stay focused, and you had to sail by the numbers and keep the boat going fast all the time. We had a lot of fun, but we took the sailing really seriously and worked hard to keep up on the trim. And, you know, there was no resting on just sailing along or anything like that. It was 24/7 sailing hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, you know, the first observation that Eric made when he was looking at the instruments was the projected boat speed of 11.4, and we were doing 10.4. So the first thing, like a duck on a bug, Eric, get right on that one. But I have to say, I think everybody became a better sailor from this experience, because the professionals that were on the boat weren't, how can I say it? It was like friendly driving. You know, we were all driven to compete, and we all driven as a team in a very friendly fashion, but nobody was dogging it. Everybody put their energy into doing well, and it was a fun vibe because of that. I think we all really enjoyed that.
Yeah, we really did. It was,
Joel,
I was just going to say, on the way out, you know, Eric and Peter and Hogan and Doug and Curtis, you know, they all know people on these boats, because it's a really small community of really high level sailors, right? And so they're all competing against their buddies, right? And so, you know, we're into it. We want to help. We want to help them beat their buddies, right? And so it was great. The standards were really high. The expectations were high. And so you just like Jonathan said, you just can't let up.
Yeah, there was. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, the camaraderie and the competitiveness and the good jokes and then the starry nights. I mean, these things were amazing. When the moon was shining, you'd see the algae glistening off the hull, that green sheen that would come off, and the occasional dolphin would be going by. And oh my God, the nights were so beautiful. And it was an amazing, very epic trip. Let's take a peek at, the view from the bow. Oh, Charlie, this is the one, remember? This is Peter's comment about we're having too much fun. Charlie, why don't you take this one? Yeah. And I don't mean that in a mean way, Peter. You said exactly the right thing.
No, we were all, you know, everybody had a chance to drive, and then we're all competitive. So it doesn't take long before everybody wants to set the speed record, right? By surfing down waves. Well, that's fine as long as you're going in the right direction. And I remember after a few hours of this, or maybe longer than that, Peter and Eric said, you know, we're not quite going in the right direction, right? We got to get the averages up more than just the maximum speed. So we kind of had to throttle back a little bit, consistent with a podium finish. So the fun factor, pure speed, had to go down just a touch.
Right. I think the comment might have been made that we're having too much fun here. So
yeah,
let's go let's go a little lower, a little slower, and let's try and win this race.
Yeah.
All right. Let's jump into the next one. Yeah, Eric, want to talk about, jibing the Queen Mary, and I described this as the Queen Mary. There's a lot of boat here, and it's a bit of a process. It's not kind of the normal process, is it? Go up. You might be on mute there, bud.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a Santa Cruz 70 is a big giant surfboard, and you go to Hawaii, so you make the pole a little bit longer to get the spinnaker out in front of the boat, and you run, asymmetrical spinnakers. So you basically have to turn the spinnaker inside out. And what you can't see on this picture, this is probably from a training day. We don't have all the sails on the deck. First thing you got to do is undo the stack, and then we've got these jockey poles that are holding the sheet out. So, you have to transfer. It's a big mission. It's basically almost all hands on deck for that, because you need grinders, you need guys to move the stack, you need guys to do the jockey pole, you need one guy on the bow, one guy at the mast, guy jibing the main sheet, one guy on the leeward runner, one guy on the weather runner, those over, and it's all got to coordinate with the helmsman. So, once you get the stack out of the way, you know, you call transfer, the pole goes forward, it comes off the pole. The pole's got to come off the mast to be brought back by the mast man and the bow guy, and then it rehooks to the new sheet. And while this is going on, the main's flying over, the windward runner's coming off, the leeward runner's coming on, the spinnaker's, you know, the clew's being let around the headstay, and you got two guys on the handles grinding as hard as they can while the skipper's watching the kite. One guy is blowing the sheet, and the other guy's sucking up, you know, 120 feet of it on the other side. So it's a bit of a process, and it's not lightly undertaken. And so we try to make sure we do it at the right time. It's always exciting when it's, of course, dark and big waves, and you got to do that.
Right, and lots,
see what's going on, wearing all this foul weather gear and safety harnesses and all that. So it's a little bit of a mission for sure. We need everybody's best at that.
Yeah, this is where you don't get a lot of sleep. If you have to jive, everybody kind of jumps back up on deck, and yeah, it's a bit of a process. Hey, Eric, why don't you tell us about how you and Peter selected the sails, and maybe you go through this document, through this chart that we've got here.
Yeah, so basically, you know, Peter's one of the, you know, world's great navigators. He's done this race a lot, and he does his homework ahead of time. We work with a meteorologist who decides, you know, what the forecast is going to be like to the best of his knowledge. And then we come up with this chart, and it projects, you know, fairly accurately how long the race is going to be, you know, and what percentage of time we're going to be on what particular sail angle. So then we look at that and we base of it, you know, what sails we need to bring. If we look at the chart on the bottom where it says sails and hours and percentage, we can see that this is a downwind race. You know, 68% of the time we had the A2 up. So that's our VMG running sail for probably 11 to 18 to 20 knots, something like that. So that's very important. We made sure that, you know, 133 hours, we better have a good one, and we better have a backup as well. If it was a super windy race, this wasn't particularly windy. We see right above it, the A4, that's our heavy air running spinnaker. It's only 2.7 hours, you know, very little time. So we brought it just in case, because sometimes you get squalls and passing through, and a lot of times you get closer to Molokai, it's very windy, but that's not super important. You know, we can see that, you know, the race starts off at LA, and we basically go upwind out to Catalina. At the bottom, it says AP 155, 14 hours. We get around Catalina, we start reaching a little bit, but very little time. So we don't really focus on upwind sails very much at all. In fact, I don't even know if we brought the code 0, the one below that, because it was so windy.
Yeah, I don't think we did.
Yeah, so we go, you know, we've got our upwind sail, and we really only bring one, even though if we're racing around the buoys, we'd have 2 or 3, because like Peter said, we want to be light. We stack them. We turn the corner around Catalina, we start reaching, it gets windy and cold and nasty. On a Santa Cruz 70, it's quite a light boat, so we put up the number 3. You can see we had that up for, you know, better part of a day. That was a projection, and a lot of that we're sailing with a reef too, because we're reaching in, you know, 20, 25 knots, 28 knots, and then the breeze, we start bearing off a little bit more, and we didn't, I think, actually bring the jib top. I don't think we brought that, because we switched straight to an A3, which is a close reaching, really stout, heavy duty spinnaker that is almost bulletproof. And then after that, we're quickly trying to get into the A2. The one thing that isn't on here, which is kind of free area, we call it, are the staysails. We also have, you know, we have a Genoa staysail for tighter reaching, and we have a spinnaker staysail we have when the spinnaker's up. That's another thing. You got to furl that and redeploy it every time you jibe. But you know, we want to sail light, so we bring what we can. It was interesting. One of the first races I ever did on Transpac, these guys, I was about 18 years old or something, and I was on a sled, and these guys had all these weird old foul weather gear and stuff like that. And part of being light, you know, in those days, we'd free up a little bit and they get warm, and the guy would take his jacket off and he'd pull off his sweatshirt or something, and he'd throw it over the side. And then they got really warm, and they were throwing all their foul weather gear and stuff overboard. They brought their oldest stuff and they just throw it. And there's rumors that in the old days, they might do that with some sails too. They stuff, you know, it was a different era, and they were just throwing stuff in the water. But these guys still adhered to throwing their clothes and stuff overboard. And I was like, man, this is the only foul weather gear I own. I'm not throwing that overboard. I'm stacking this on the rails for the rest of the race. But that was one thing I learned. Funny.
Right. Okay. Well, let's see. We're going to jump on to the next one here, and a little bit light below deck there. It was nice atmosphere. Always fun times down on the boat. I have to say that the vibe was really good. And here we are. We're coming to Molokai, and it's a fascinating place. Bob, I think you did a little research on this place, didn't you?
Well, you know, there's a leper colony on Molokai, Peninsula, and it was set up by the king of Hawaii back in 1866. There were thousands of lepers there, and that leper colony operated until 1969. And even today, there's 14 people who formerly had leprosy that continue to live there.
And I think this is a picture of the lighthouse at that colony.
That would be the peninsula, yeah.
That's where it's windy. Right. That's why you go there.
Yeah, we went right past
breeze
it.
Compresses right there against Molokai, and we just get in there. We are good breeze on the way
there,
cruising across Molokai. Yep. It's just stunning with the cliffs and all the vegetation and everything. It's very cool to be able to go by it during the day.
Yeah, that was it. We're ending the trip, and this is getting really epic. Wind is coming up, it's compressing, and like I said, still focused. Everybody is just totally into it. And then I remember that night, oh my God, did it blow? Starboard going through the channel, and what do you guys think the wind was? I knew it just totally compresses between the two islands. And Eric or Peter, what do you remember that wind being?
Gee, it was stuff. It was that's the great parts of the race. It was in the 20s for sure, and we got some great surfs in. The waves are usually in the race that you get the biggest waves right there in the Molokai Channel, which is really only about 12 or 15 miles long. But, you know, all of a sudden, it's just the adrenaline factor goes up. You can see the loom of Honolulu up ahead, but you're hanging on for dear life, just shredding down these big waves. And we had perfect timing getting to see Molokai there in near sunset.
Yeah, and then we came in, we got in, and here we are. And I think we arrived at the club probably 1:15, something like that. A bunch of horns were honking, and we got welcomed by, I think we went by a Hooters or something like that, and everybody was shouting out as we went by. It was a fun way to be welcomed to Hawaii. So I remember that was really cool. You guys have anything else that you want to comment on?
I'd like to say how grateful I was to Joel and the professionals for the level of excellence and their patience in working with us that weren't as good as sailors as them. Was just, I can't say, I learned so much from the race. It was fantastic.
It was a good.
I think finishing the race is really fun in Hawaii. It's one of the great things to do because the locals really get into it. Every yacht club, a family adopts a boat. You know, they figure out, hey, and they track the boat and they see what's going on, and they know when you're coming in. You know, everybody's partying at the yacht clubs. You pull into the alleyway there, and there's one yacht club on one side of the channel, one on the other. And it doesn't matter what time of day, there's somebody in there partying, having a good time. And they welcome you in, they go, aloha. The guy's on a big megaphone, you know, welcome, you know, whomever, Catapult, Grand Illusion, you know, and then there's, then they meet you at the dock and they give you these beautiful flowered leis. They give you a big pineapple that's got the middle carved out, and it's a giant Mai Tai, and, you know, you haven't had anything to drink for 10 days, so you get all hammered, and they put a big party on. They put tents out and have parties, and, you know, you recover a little bit, and then you look on the track, oh, there's another boat coming in, so you go down and you're part of that whole deal. And that's really something very, very unique to that I've never seen anywhere else in the world on any distance race. That every boat has a host, and they are just wonderful people, just taking care of you. And they love it, because if boats finish for like 2 weeks or something, so they're just partying nonstop for like 14 days. It's got to be challenging on the liver, that's for sure.
You know, one other thing, it was nice to meet Charlie's brother, who lived in Hawaii.
I remember that.
Married,
Oh,
married
yeah.
to a local woman. And in fact, one of the guys that I'd done a lot of business with, and who I brought him to the U.S. to visit Culligan when we first started doing business together. He lives on Saipan. He is the famous navigator Mao's nephew from Yap. I don't know if anybody's heard of him. And he's related to Charlie's brother's wife. So we didn't learn that until we were over in Hawaii, which was kind of neat. And this guy, he'd met Joel too, because I brought him back to Minneapolis to do a meeting at Culligan. Oh, it had to be 15 years ago. So it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, the connections all over the world. I have to say this is an epic trip, and I want to thank everybody for joining the call tonight, guys. I think you did a great job. These are awesome stories. And the last thing I want to point out here, and I think, Jonathan, didn't you bring the Wayzata Yacht Club Burgee? And it's now, where is it? It's hanging there.
You know, I did not actually bring that Burgee. I was at the Waikiki Yacht Club looking at all the Burgees, and there it was. So
there it was. All right.
Yeah, it was great.
World famous.
And I gotta say, this was a fantastic trip, and just a great group of guys to go sailing with, and can't thank Joel enough for giving us all the opportunity to be out there. It is an experience of a lifetime, I have to say, and I can't wait to go again.
There you
okay.
Go,
well, thanks, guys. I appreciate that, and I got to say, you all know how much I love it. This was so much fun. And putting this back together again, reliving this trip, I really enjoyed this. So I think we've hit our time slot plus a little bit. And do we go to questions now? Leadership at the Wayzata Yacht Club.
Yep, this is Jolene. So if anybody wants to ask questions, feel free to type them in the chat. It looks like there's just one question so far. So Truex is asking, what are the critical tools?
Yeah, I think that,
yeah,
Patty, right.
Yeah.
Duct tape and a hammer.
Yes.
Band-aids.
Separate the rig.
Ibuprofen. Aspirin and ibuprofen. That's my vote.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Wait, can I tell a quick story?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One of our, most important guy on the race is the navigator, Pete's the MVP. But right behind that is the cook, the guy who volunteers to do the cooking, and that was Hogan. We didn't really get to talk about Hogan too much. He's from up Northern California. He's done, as probably not as many miles as Patty because he's not quite that old, but he races all the time offshore. So he agrees to do the cooking, and he's doing a great job. And in addition to everything else, which is a lot of hard work. Well, the boat needs power, right? And it's got an engine, and we got to run the engine occasionally to charge the batteries. That's how the batteries charge. So when we cruise along, we put the shifter into reverse. so that the prop doesn't spin. So when we start the motor, we put it in neutral, we start the engine. And in this particular boat, it's got kind of an original sail drive. And then you got to rev it up a little bit to make sure that the engine charges quickly. You know, we need however many, I don't know, 2,000 RPMs, I don't know. But this boat, sometimes we would put that in the, and you didn't know if it was a neutral or not, and it would kind of slam into gear and it would go bang, and it really sounds like something's fallen overboard or something like that. And every time
Patty loses it, right.
Hogan would come up and he'd be like, you guys got to be careful. You guys got to be careful. And then we do it for like the 4th or 5th time. I learned to just stay away from it. Like I was not involved in charging at all because I would do that. And somebody
Hogan didn't like that.
And it goes bang, and Hogan comes up and he's like, God damn it. You guys did it again. If you break this thing, we're not going to be able to charge. We're not going to have any power. He just went on this tirade. It was awesome. I just had a video. He's like, you need to treat this boat like it's a space shuttle, and we're in the middle of space because we will not get there. We could die out there, you guys. Come on, you know. And it just, oh, it was awesome. If I had a video of that, I would show it every time because it was spot on because we had no idea what we were doing with that damn thing. We should have just made him do it every time so we wouldn't get berated. But it was great.
I think he did start doing it every time, Eric.
I think maybe he did. That's probably what it ended up. But he was fantastic. We did some great sailing with him on the Coastal Cup that year when it was windier than snot. We had like 30 knots for 18 hours. It was great fun. But I just remembered that. He was like, treat this thing like it's the space shuttle. It's just great. It was so much fun.
I do remember that. Yeah, he did kind of very much slack.
Yeah, we do have some more questions here. So
okay, fire away.
Someone is asking who owns the boat and how was the weather on the trip?
Weather was epic. It was really cold and then it was really hot. And so it was perfect. I mean, it was California in July and then it was like Alaska in November and then it was Hawaii in July. So it was wonderful. And I own the boat. So I bought it, I don't know, a number of years ago. It used to be the Pyewacket owned by Roy Disney, all carbon fiber hull, and it did well. I think its first race, it won it's won the Transpac a couple of times. So it's a good boat. I really enjoy it. We all enjoy the boat. It's kind of our boat.
Super stiff.
Yeah, it's a solid boat.
I think it set the record the first time it was out. So it set a record at that point.
I think it may have. Yeah, it's all carbon fiber. It was light. It was probably one of the lighter boats at the time.
Yeah.
Great. All right. And Gordon would like to know, asked if you can speak to the routing decisions made by the fleet in this race and how that affected the finishing order.
Peter.
Yeah, I don't know if it's easy to share one of those earlier slides of the route of the race, but basically what we do is we study it, and Eric was talking about that Excel spreadsheet table you saw earlier that gives us an idea of what the conditions are going to be. But then, there we go, keep it on that for a second. But throughout the race, every 6 hours, the navigator will download with that satellite dome that you saw sticking up on a pole at the transom of the boat, download the weather forecast in the form of a digital file. And there's a whole method to the madness and science and which weather model to use, just like there is to which app you use to figure out what the wind's going to be tomorrow on the lake. But essentially, the key decision in the race, or a key decision in the race, is really at about the point where we're seeing the fleet right now. What angle do you spear south? Before you can sail that black line is the Great Circle route, which is the straight line. Now go back to the other one.
You bet.
Mine. But so you can see that this is actually with a bunch of this is a yellow brick tracker. You can see some boats go higher and closer to the black rum line, and some sag lower. And lower is faster because the wind is ahead at that point. And a key decision is what angle do you leave the west coast of California in Catalina and how tight do you close reach? Because once the wind comes aft, once you get about a third of the way across, you're in the trade winds and you're kind of stuck in your lane. Stan Honey calls it the slot car lane for about half of the race, about 5 days in the case of the Santa Cruz 70, where you're on starboard pole and you can see that curve. These are two different routings. One was with the European weather model and one's with the GFS model, but you can see how the route curves along and slowly arcs back up towards the rum line in both the yellow track and the red track. Well, you're stuck on starboard pole. You jibe to port, you're just going to be going away from the mark. And so where you are in that lane when the wind comes aft is very important. And we did a really good job with this. And there were probably 5 or 6, essentially, it's not a one design class, but it's a level rating class of 70 footers. And we were neck and neck with the boat that eventually won Pyewacket and got quite far ahead, like hundreds of miles of some of the other boats, just based on early decisions. But it's a fascinating tactical thing. And then a decision, and then the next tactical decisions come a little bit later in the race of how you play the shifts as you come into the islands, as we can see from those 2 tracks there. And the squalls that come through can be both devastating or can make or break your race. But in the case of this race, Pyewacket got away from us a little bit later on in the slot car portion, where they were a little bit better positioned, and then got on one side of a squall that we got on the wrong side of and slipped away. But we retained our lead on the other boats.
Great, thank you. And James was asking if you could provide an idea as to the cost to successfully compete in this race.
Boy, you know, if I think about that, I'll get a headache. So I'm not going to answer.
Maybe a private discussion.
Yeah, maybe a private discussion. It was just, yeah, I don't even want to spend the time trying to figure that one out because it would make me sad. I had so much fun in this trip, and I hate that old expression, priceless, but this is priceless. This is, you can't, how do you come up with fabulous memories? It's, owning stuff is, anybody can own stuff. How do you build memories? That's what I think all of us are all about. How do you build these really rich memories? And yeah, so I don't know. And I'm not sure if I really want to do the work to know.
All right. And Carolyn asked if you are going to do the race again.
I think we will. We may do the Pac Cup, and we're not going to do it this year. COVID is there's just too much weirdness out there with COVID. And we've got another J70 Worlds happening this summer in August. So it'd be difficult to go from the Transpac straight over to the J70, and which is also on the LA area. But I could see us doing the Pac Cup, which would be next year. That starts out of San Francisco. It's a similar race, and it'd be fun to have both of these under our belt. So that's a real possibility.
Great. And Sue asked, what is the top speed running downwind during the race?
Eric, remember that race that we did? It was part of the Coastal Cup series where John Munson went flying through the lifeline and dislocated his shoulder, and we had it. Yeah, and he woke up after he was on drugs and said, "What an epic ride it was." But remember, it was like, "Oh my God, that was amazing!" Yeah. And God, does this hurt? But remember our top speed. I remember we took some. That was an amazing downwind ride. And what do you think? What do you think the fastest you've been?
I have video on that thing of we were when I was driving, it was 25 knots, and then I think just after that Joel, I think you hit 27 knots.
Yeah, we had a lot more wind in that race. you know, during Transpac, it wasn't a very windy year. You know, we had a couple nights where it's kind of breezy that we were hitting 18 or something like that. But I remember I hadn't sailed sleds in a while, and we did that Coastal Cup, and 30 knots of breeze, the boat would just sit on 22 knots, just like, just planing, and then you'd surf down a wave at, 25, 27, and like Jonathan said, you hit 28. But I was impressed that you could, you could sit on 22 knots. And if it got lighter than 30 knots, you actually turned the bow up to you could keep going that fast, but you went hotter. And it was like, normally you don't think about going hotter when it's blowing 28 knots and you got a full A4 and full main up, but you do, and you sit on 22 knots. And that's what we had to focus on a little bit of the race. We talked about it briefly, that you got to look at the lowest speed, because that's your average. The peaks are great, but if you go, 20 knots and then the bottom of the wave, now you're going 10 knots, and then you get it back up to 15, you surf on wave at 20 knots, you go back down to 10 knots. Well, your average is going to be like 10 knots. So you need to just sit on 15 all the time and stuff like that. But that was 28 knots, which is pretty impressive on a 70-foot boat. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, and then one of the things I got to comment about the sleds, it's finger trip driving. I mean, it's just, remember going down those waves, Eric? I mean, it's two fingers.
Yeah.
The boat is so responsive. And they're just made for that kind of surfing experience.
Big wheel, nice big wheel, good ratio on the quadrant and everything. So that's what they're built for. They're fantastic.
Yeah, really cool.
Great. So Barb wants to know, with Charlie's briefing about PFDs, she didn't see the crew wearing them for many of the photos nor clipped in. So just curious about that.
Yeah, that's
Charlie, you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's a good point. And we were guided by Joel's decision, Peter's advice, Eric's. So it's up to the skipper when you wear them. We always wore them at night. But we didn't have them on at all times during the day because you just really don't need them. So, but at night, as I recall, we had them on all the time. And then if conditions warrant it, then the call is made and everybody puts them on.
Great. And John is curious, was this the boat on the movie Morning Glory?
No.
I just saw that boat the other day. It's in San Diego in a shipyard, but this is a Santa Cruz 70, and the Morning Glory movie boat was a TP52, which goes about the same speed, but is a smaller, more uncomfortable, and much wetter boat than a Santa Cruz 70.
Idiots.
All right. So. And number of people thanking you all in the chat. That's the end of the questions that I see right now. Does anybody want to turn their mics on and ask live questions?
Hey, this is Thorne. I just want to say,
hey, Thorne.
Hey, Thorne.
Thorne.
Joel, Charlie, Jonathan, Eric, Peter, Patty, thank you very much. Awesome presentation. Really fun to listen to.
Good.
Well, it was fun doing.
Yeah. It was really fun to put together.
It really was.
Yeah, this was cool. Come sail with us, Thorny. We miss you, man.
Anytime. Look forward to it. And this is my idea.
Okay.
So.
Back up. He's on the list.
There you go. Thank you.
On the crew list.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Last call for questions. If anyone has any questions. Going once, going twice. All right, Barb, you want to close us out?
Okay. Well, just like they say, when you arrive, when you leave Hawaii, it's aloha. So I got to put these on again so I can do our send up. Great presentation by everyone. Glad we didn't lose the Zoom connection with the storm roaring outside, but thank you so much, Joel and the team. Impressive to hear like the prep behind the scenes and your days at sea, to the camaraderie amongst all of you. I'd say there sounds like a bromance between all of you. You're
very much. We're engaged.
You all ended up as friends from this, and this is good. And Joel, just so you know, I'm a really fun person, and you said fun was a requirement, so just keep that in mind for future. So thank you. This concludes our final Wanderlust series for just 2021. But and thank you, Jolene, and for Sheila for all the hours. People don't realize how many hours go in behind the practicing and everything. So really, they get a break now. They get to sail and enjoy sailing. But we know there are more stories and tales and adventures to be told. So if you want to think about presenting yourself in 2022, because we're going to kind of take a break now, and or you can nominate others. This was really well received this year. So meanwhile, just have a great sailing season, everyone. Thank you.
Well, thanks for the invitation. This was really fun to do, and we really appreciate the invitation. So thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Jolene and Barb. That was great.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody.
Right.
Take care, Charlie. See you in Guam.
Yep.
Welcome, everybody.
Invite us out there.
Yeah, you're all welcome to come. There's plenty of room.
All right. Let's go.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.